Good day. I'm the last speaker during the graveyard shift. That's my Twitter profile if you want to comment on my talk. Can you hear me properly? Sweet. Okay, so I was supposed to talk about, let's put a timing on as well. I was supposed to talk about investment is political, but to be honest, basically every single talk this entire 2 days has been on the fact that investment is political in some way. So in some sense, that's not a particularly profound thing to say for me to say right now. So I might just I'm going to try to talk a bit about the piece I did for the ebook, which I did in a real rush, and I kind of so we'll see how it goes. I mean, my basic point I was trying to make, and which I think we've basically covered over the last few days, is that the financial sector and the investment sector is an intensely political, it's a political institution, and it's quite interesting because this taps into a broader debate around whether economics and politics should be separate things. Of course, we've designed the system of disciplines which imagine these things to be different, but of course, I mean, the distribution of resources in society is an incredibly political thing by default. And actually, it's weird in the public debate when people are talking about, the politics of finance. It's always when the financial sector somehow butts heads with politicians, But there's the imagined world of the apolitical, everyday, ordinary life of the financial sector, which is just doing normal things. And then somehow, occasionally, you have these kind of deviants. People who will say engage in tax avoidance, or maybe screw something up, or maybe a politician will try to interfere in that process, and that's when it gets political. I think so it starts from this idea of this imagined apolitical form, which then gets corrupted by politics, whether it's by the people inside a bank or by people outside a bank. Whereas my basic, somewhat not particularly profound point is that investment is by default political, regardless of whether politicians are involved, regardless of whether the people involved are deviant or not. And the basic, again, some slightly banal point to make about this is that because the financial sector is effectively the creator, custodian, and intermediary in claims upon society. And claims are by default political. A claim on somebody to me represents, in accounting terms, an asset, whereas to them it represents a debt, something that they're obligated to do. So claims are by default, and particularly political things. Basically, what I tried to do with this piece that I wrote was to create a kind of taxonomy of claims. Actually, I think it's a taxonomy. I don't know if that's just the right word, but we'll see. So, I did this here. So we have value in the world, right? Whatever theory of value you have, we could basically, utility value of food. We can agree that this is something that has actual value in the world. Or it could be labor value, the human endeavor that's embedded in all this kind of stuff. And so this is the base level reality of our world. Which is, anybody who actually lives outside of a city will tend to understand this. Most people who live in cities will frequently forget the base level reality of what economies actually are. But let's just take, we have a thing called value. And this is a kind of a discussion about the nature of money has been coming up over the last few days. Now, there's this incredibly bullshit notion that you find in mainstream, or a lot of economics, which is the idea that money is a store of value. A bit like, this coffee cup here could be a store of coffee, this is a store of coffee. But what money tends to actually be is almost like a claim written upon this thing here. So it'll be more like a claim I can have upon it. So a much better way to think about money is as a claim on value. And claims have to be politically constructed and socially constructed. So I actually use this picture here because it's quite an interesting thing, a conceptual experiment, when you think, what happens when a person burns money? Is value actually destroyed when somebody burns money, in this case here? Has anybody got any ideas on that?
No.
Sorry?
Value increases because there's less money.
Yeah, basically. I mean, effectively, the act of burning money is an act of sacrifice. You're basically saying, I'm going to give up my claim to whatever this money represents, and I'm going to pass it on to somebody else. So this is quite an interesting conceptual thing to understand this notion of money as a claim. But there's a whole sort of world around how money comes to be to represent this. We're not going to go into that theory here, but some of the psychological structure that makes money a reality is based on sort of social network effects. The fact that we all believe it's redeemable for real goods and services. Okay? And then everybody collectively agrees that it's very hard for any one person to stand against that. So it locks itself into a society. And then it also has this backing of political authorities. You don't actually need political authorities to make money work at a small scale. But if you ever want to get like national level currencies, you tend to have these like large, powerful institutions that help to scale up. And one particular way you can do that, for example, is making it a tax credit. So tax credits can form the kernel around which a monetary claim can begin to sort of get stability. So that's why people say, whatever the government accepts as tax as money. That's not entirely true, but it's a pretty good claim for national currencies anyway. So this is my first level of claims in society. And I can take these claims and get things for them, right? In reality, though, most of this is an issue that's popped up constantly throughout these couple of days. Is actually, while we perceive all money as being the same thing, like all British pounds are created equal, in reality, the majority of the money we use is actually commercial bank money, which exists as data entries in commercial banks. So this is effectively claims upon value. Okay, and this is your what we call like electronic money, or basically your internet bank money. How you get this money is that you take maybe some original money form and you quote unquote deposit it into a bank, at which point they will then credit an account with claims upon claims for you. Okay. Alternatively, you can get it by asking for a loan, at which point they will just create it for you. All right. This is what we call the fractional reserve banking system. That's where all the stuff around money creation comes from. They'll credit it into an account for you out of nothing. Okay, and so I don't have to go into the details of this, but effectively most of the money we use is claims upon claims. Okay, and this is like a very sort of blunt representation of this. If I ever want to pay somebody using this claim upon a claim, I have to go via the commercial banking system, where effectively we have an elaborate system of ledgers, where they have ledgers recording everyone's accounts, and then they subsequently have a ledger between themselves at the central bank that they use to settle their own claims between each other with. So if I want to pay Joel, I'm going to go via the co-op bank, or actually we both at the co-op bank probably, or whatever. Let's imagine we have different banks. I'm going to send a message into the banking system, ask them to change IT database entries in their ledgers in their IT systems. They will do that, and they will subsequently send a message to the central bank via the real-time gross settlement system and change their own account, their own little Excel spreadsheets at the Bank of England at some point during the day. And this is basically how the entire electronic money supply works. And when you think about electronic money, effectively all it is a digital ledger combined with a communications system and an authentication system. So this is our modern money. And you'll note that the portability of this money is irrelevant because it never actually moves. The real thing you need is a communications system. That's how it quote unquote moves around. Okay, so it's not like money you carry around. Okay, so once we have established this, is that kind of like clear? Okay. So it's like a second level of claims. A third level of financial claims then, so it starts to get kind of interesting. Particular financial instruments, which are claims upon future, claims upon value. Okay, you can see I'm trying to do this almost like computer code. So there is a fixed claim upon future, claims upon value, which is called a bond. Okay, it's a fixed. I basically exchange money. And in exchange for giving that money, I get this new claim. All right. So I take that, and I put it via a financial instrument, and in return, I then get a claim upon future bank money. Okay. And if it's a bond, it's fixed. If it's a share, it's a variable claim. And this is effectively like the underlying sort of reality of a financial instrument. I hope that's not kind of like too complicated. Does anybody want to ask any questions about that? Is that kind of cool? Okay, but note the key thing about what's like a financial transaction, it involves an intertemporal like jump. It's an exchange that takes place between two moments in time. So the future element's very important. And this is what we call like, investment over time. Now we have financial vehicles. We've got to like a fourth level of complexity here. Claims upon multiple, claims upon future, claims upon value. Okay, aka claims upon multiple financial instruments. Okay, put into a vehicle. All right. So I can get a BlackRock mutual fund. It in turn will then own a bunch of financial instruments which give me access to future cash flows. Okay. And that's effectively another level of claims we have now, which I have against these intermediaries. Okay. I just wanted to show a little example. This is from the perspective of like a single one of those vehicles, but you could put it from the perspective of a single financial instrument. For example, this is actually these are very old like bond certificates. So Standard Oil Company doesn't exist anymore. I think it's turned into ExxonMobil actually. Am I right about that? Yeah. No, I wouldn't, but we can talk about that later. Okay. Well, I mean, there's a direct link here. Derivatives, I'm going to go into derivatives, and I'll say why I don't think that's the case. So here you can have, for example, a bunch of those vehicles all going via a particular financial instrument into something in the real world. Okay, like a mine. And Goldman Sachs might sit in the middle and arrange for them all to do this. Okay. And I'm going to show you a particular project that I was working on with a Berlin-based group called Open Oil, where we were trying to trace BP shares and who exactly is doing this with BP shares for an open data project. So here we have a whole bunch of financial vehicles. BlackRock, the People's Republic of China's sovereign wealth fund, Prudential. These are all basically funds. So they are those things there, effectively. They all then use a BP share to get access to BP PLC, which is a holding company for all of those companies over there, okay? Which in turn are holding companies for all of those companies there, okay? So effectively, you can go as one of these vehicles can get access to this via the BP share into that structure there, which in turn explodes out into that there, okay? Now each one of those in turn is locked into the real world with actual assets on the ground. Well, not necessarily all of them, but at some point there will be. So I'm going to isolate one of those strands for you, which is, for example, this one here. So we go from BP PLC via all these companies here, and eventually you get to a company in the Cayman Islands called the Baku Klabisi Seyhan Pipeline Company, and it ends there. All right? So that's the reality of what this company is and what it does. Okay. This is kind of like, it acts as a claim upon the actual earth itself. It's like sucking the ground up in a sense, or like kind of like dredging stuff out. And you can see it's happening via this large sort of conduit structure. Here's maybe like one way you can visualize that entire thing. BP shareholders are obtaining claims via the shares on BP PLC, which in turn holds claims upon that giant network of subsidiaries, which in turn hold claims upon probably about 10,000 of those things over there, or maybe more, who knows. And then in turn, they suck value back from that, up via that structure, up via BP PLC, via the BP Treasury, via the BP share, back through that system there, and then out into people like pensioners, for example, walking around the streets of London. Is that kind of like clear enough? How much longer do I have, by the way? Okay, now I want to get one last level of complexity. Financial vehicles that hold other financial vehicles. Okay, so claims upon multiple vehicles holding claims upon multiple claims upon future claims upon value. Okay, so you can deconstruct these things into these long strings of kind of definitions. And for example, this could be during the financial crisis. This could be like a CDO squared. That could be like that vehicle there. It then holds other CDOs who in turn hold a bunch of loans, like a network portfolio of loans over there. Alternatively, this actually might be, for example, a fund of funds. One fund has shares in 3 other funds who in turn have giant portfolios of shares themselves. And each one of those shares that they hold in turn could be one of those BP shares, which turns into a giant network like that. Okay, so you could have literally like tens of thousands of entities claiming something from them via that single structure there. I'm going to end this. You can push this up as many levels as you want. You can get another level of this at some point. The one last sort of element of this puzzle then I want to put in is derivatives, which are bets on those particular claims. Okay. So now you have bets upon claims upon value, which is basically bets on money, currency derivatives. I'm going to take bets on money. I'm going to take bets upon financial instruments, that second one there, e.g. an equity derivative. I'm going to bet on shares. Okay. Alternatively, I can bet on quasi-financial vehicles, like an index-based swap, which is like, say, a collection, an index based on a whole bunch of different financial instruments put together, actually then bet on that index. Then, once you have those original primary level bets, you can add a second level of bets on those to create bets upon bets. So, for example, a swaption. Here you have an example of an equity swaption. Remember that original situation I set up there with a BP share? You could have a side bet going on between Thames River Capital, a hedge fund, which you can find in Mayfair, and Deutsche Bank. They might enter into a bet with each other in the form of an option. The option itself will get its derived value from an imagined future swap, which will get its value from BP shares. But note, I've sort of like partitioned it off there because there's no direct link. It's actually it's like watching from the side and betting on something without actually being connected to it. So there's a giant world of these bets upon the claims of the financial sector. Okay, I got through that. I don't have very much time left. This has been useful in some ways. It's kind of like a... now the kind of question you want to ask yourself, so what's the politics of this? This is a bit of a messy slide, I'm sorry. But when you're thinking about the politics of the financial sector, you can go to every single one of these levels and start to make claims about it. The politics of money itself, what's the relation to the state in maintaining the sort of belief in money? What about the internal politics of communities that keeps that money going? Then, of course, we have a large amount of debate on the politics of money creation by that secondary level of money creation, which is about who has rights to actually create the money supply. And if banks, for example, are going to actually be creating the money supply via this fractional reserve banking system, what should they be lending to in that sort of original process to create that money supply? What kind of things? Then we have another third level there, which is the politics of these, the financial instruments, which then use that commercial bank money. The politics of the investment banks. This, for example, we can go into stuff like, should Goldman Sachs be arranging deals to finance mountaintop coal removal, for example? There's a lot of politics around this type of stuff. Of course, we can also look in securitization of student loans as one of these instruments here. Then there's that sort of level around financial investment managers. And for example, there's a big move around divestment campaigns right now. That's targeting those investment managers, being like, why are you selecting portfolios of those particular financial instruments? You are aggregating these in these financial vehicles that you're then asking universities and so on to invest in. Why are you doing that? You shouldn't be doing that. In the last turn, maybe 1 minute or so, I just want to say, and we're not going to have time to go into any detail on this, but there's a whole bunch of quite problematic ideologies you find within the financial sector that financial professionals use to deny the fact that they have any kind of political role or that they have any kind of responsibility in this process. One of them, this is a bit of sort of an abstract way of representing it. Financial intermediaries, or say, for example, fund managers, often claim that they are mere sort of passive agents, rational passive agents, that on the one hand merely respond to the clients who, say, give them money, and on the other hand merely respond to rational incentives from the economy. So it's almost just like this kind of like automatum type notion of existence. And I've tried to use this here to be like a fund manager considering future options for where they could put their money. Now, this existing path here is based on previous investment decisions. So, well, the path you choose to put money on makes that path a reality in the future. Okay, so you will create the reality by where you choose to invest, if that makes sense. So, but investment managers often sort of claim they have no choice in this process. But in the act of actually making an investment, you make things into realities, and you are actually engaging in an active creative choice. And this is a big element of, say, what divestment movements try to do. They're trying to say you're not passive agents. You are active political agents that make certain things in the future a reality. So breaking down this kind of notion is very important. One other thing which is quite interesting for like sociologists and stuff is the use of, say, financial models to distance people from reality or distance them from responsibility. The other day I was in a shop, and the shopkeeper was trying to charge me a huge amount of money for a Visa photograph, like to get a Visa, and he was trying to charge me £25. And I was like, this is ridiculous. And so he points to a price list on the wall. He's like, look at the thing on the wall. It says that it's a price. And so I'm like, so you're pointing to some imagined third party that exists outside of yourself on this wall, a piece of technology, and you're trying to use that to say why we shouldn't have a discussion between ourselves. And this is what financial models often do. Like financial professionals be like, well, look, the model says this here. Therefore, it's not me who did anything. This is like a very bullshit concept, but it's very powerful. And one, I'm not going to get a chance to go into this, but like a large part of what's called rational investment has a lot of emotional and value-based claims that are embedded in it that financial professionals cannot see. So, for example, it used to be considered rational to invest in slave labor. A normal investment would involve, this would be perfectly normal. Nowadays, what's called rational investment has an embedded principle in it that says investing in slave labor is not acceptable. This is not a rational concept. These are politically created concepts. And right with what people like, say, for example, the divestment movement are trying to do right now is that they're trying to take what's called rational investment and say, well, we've got to put a new principle in that, for example, wrecking ecological systems whilst investing is also unacceptable. So a large part of this politics is how do you change the notion of what normal investment is? And I'll end on that.
Excellent.